I am grateful to all of you for taking this seriously and coming. Appreciate the work of superintendents at helping to emphasize this, and hopefully it will be a beneficial time for you. We are recording this today simply so we have the ability to have this training available for any laypersons who are not able to be here or part-time folk who were not able to be here for whatever reason. So all of these resources will be on the website, and you can get refreshers if you would like to have that. I'm Stella Roberts, serving as chair of the Conference Board of Ordained Ministry, and I'll be leading the training with the help of David Woody, who is in the back there, having found a cup of coffee. David serves as the Vocational Discernment Coordinator. That was a new position that was added by the action of the 2012 General Conference to really assist district committees on ministry in the whole process of candidacy. And so he'll be sharing with us a little bit later. And I believe Dan Taylor will also be participating later. Dan Taylor is the registrar of for the board and works in clergy services. I wanted to get us started in thinking about our work as district committees. Very early on in the Christian movement, it became evident that a key component of accomplishing the ministry and mission which Jesus sought to accomplish for the kingdom had to do with finding the right leadership. So one of Jesus' first acts of ministry was to invite some other folk to come along and walk with him as leaders. And so he called the disciples. And a couple of chapters in Luke, after he called the disciples, then he gave them some instructions and sent them out to do their work. It wasn't long, though, before he learned that, well, maybe 12 folk aren't really enough. And so those first 12 maybe became the first district committee on ordained ministry. And were sent out to find 70 more. And the 70 joined along and shared in the work that was to be done. And as the early church grew and the work expanded, it became evident that, well, there's more jobs to be done than can be done by these 12 and by these 70. And so then you came into the book of Acts, where persons were identified to help with different roles in the work of ministry. And that kind of sets the precedent for us, as we find that we have lots of different people are called into ministry from lots of different backgrounds and skills and gifts, and there are a variety of roles that these persons fulfill in their ministry. The district committees on ministry have the privilege and the responsibility of helping women and men discern their call into lay, licensed, and ordained ministry. And you're here, I think, because you realize that that is a responsibility that's not to be taken lightly. That we're entrusted with a very serious responsibility and work for the church. The leadership to which people are called may take many forms, require many gifts, and these gifts are many and varied. It's our job initially to determine an individual's spiritual, physical, emotional, mental fitness for the work of ministry. That's kind of the first level. And then to guide them as they seek to best serve in the ministry to which they've been called. And then we have the opportunity to offer guidance and encouragement as these individuals develop leadership skills in ministry and as they grow in faith and love to become spiritual leaders in the churches of the conference. One of the resources which has been used in leadership Holston is this book, Leadership in the Wesleyan Spirit by Lovett Weems. Some of you, most of you maybe, are very familiar with this book. In one section, Weems describes practices of leadership in the Wesleyan spirit, one of which is multiple leadership. And he says, from the beginning of the Wesleyan movement, many people functioned as leaders. People from different social locations helped this passionate movement of God. There was no one route to leadership in the Wesleyan ranks. Leadership came from Church of England priests, and also from a stonemason, a printer and publisher, a baker, a cobbler, and a schoolmaster. Leaders were male and female, ordained and lay, of noble birth and modest origin, black and white. And he tells a story about something, an incident that he learned about when he was in England a number of years ago. And I'm going to just read this because I think it's pertinent for our work as district committees. He says, in London there's a Roman Catholic priest named John who had a dream of having a ministry with some of the lowest paid workers in London. When after several years his assignments never made this possible, he took a job as a street sweeper. Without anyone knowing that he was a priest, he found his ministry each day among co-workers. Worked out wonderfully. He was a bit older, a bit slower than the other street sweepers, and at the end of every day there was work that had not been completed. The other street sweepers would come together, help finish his assigned work. They didn't mind because they discovered very quickly that even though John was a bit older and a bit slower than the rest of them, he was a good talker. When they had trouble with wages or working conditions, they would explain it to John, and he would talk for them to the powers that be. One morning, John came to work, and a small group of co-workers was waiting, as they had done on many other occasions, with some problem. Today, their faces held more anguish than usual. They said, "John, something terrible has happened. Joe was found dead this morning." Joe was a 40-year-old co-worker. He had died in a homemade shed in an alleyway. And they said, if we'd only known he was sick, we could have done something. We could have helped in some way, but now it's too late. We'll never be able to do anything for him. And John said, well, maybe you're wrong. Maybe it's not too late. And they said, what do you mean? He's dead. How can we help Joe? And John said, at least we can give him a decent funeral. And they responded, but we wouldn't know where to begin. And it was at that moment John revealed that he was a priest and that he would help them plan a funeral. So at the end of the week, Joe's funeral took place in a church arranged by Father John. Street sweepers from all over London came for that service. John, now dressed as a priest, presided at the service. When the service was over, but before anyone got up, one of the street sweepers sitting near the front stood and looked out over this sea of street sweepers. With a dazed and puzzled look on his face, he said, "How many more priests are there here?" And that's really our question. That's really the question of Christian discipleship. That's the question of Christian leadership in the church. That's the question I think that God is asking us who are entrusted with the work of district committees on ministry and conference board of ordained ministry, that God is asking us in the church today. How many priests, how many ministers, how many leaders for God are there throughout the church? And how can we find those persons, encourage those persons, support those persons, and lead those persons to fulfill their calling? James Kouzes and Barry Posner said in their edition of the Leadership Challenge, Liberate the leader in everyone, and extraordinary things happen. And that's what we're given the privilege of doing. So it's my prayer as we begin this morning and further as we do all of our work together, that we'll be attentive to all of those whom God has called to be leaders within the community of faith, and that we might take seriously the challenge to liberate the leaders who we encounter so that together truly extraordinary things can happen in and for God's kingdom. Okay, I think everybody has a packet. Is that right? Did everybody? There's a few extra here on the front rows, but if you need one. I wanted to just put some resources in your hands that you could refer to in your work going forward. Some of this may be very familiar to you. Some of you, I know, have been serving on a district committee for years and years and years. So there may not be much new, although I think there will be some new because things have changed in recent years. But I wanted you to have the resources that you need to be able to refer to so that you can get the help that you need for the work. So let's begin by first going through this packet of material, and stop me at any time if you've got questions. If there's something that you want some more clarity on, we're going to be, David will be sharing a bit more about the new group candidacy process and the orientation to ministry, and so we'll get to that. But as we move through these handouts, just feel free to interrupt at any time and to ask any questions you might have. On the back of the agenda sheet is the disciplinary summary of what our responsibilities are as district committees. And I want to begin by just emphasizing how important this work is, that a district committee is a subcommittee of the conference board. And that's really important to understand. The conference board cannot do its work without the district committees, each one taking their responsibilities very, very seriously. Not just doing work as a rubber stamp, but joining with the board in really helping people to discern if where they think they're headed is really the best place for them, the best place for them to live out their gifts and grace for the ministry in Christ Church, in a United Methodist Church, in the Holston Conference. So there's lots of qualifications there. So these are just some of the responsibilities that the discipline lists. Candidacy mentors, David will talk about that. That process has changed a bit in recent years as to how we use mentors in candidacy studies. Supervise matters dealing with candidacy and licensing, counsel candidates, review academic progress. As you probably know, you are the ones who work with seminarians. The conference board does not work with seminarians. They don't come to the conference until they've completed their educational requirements. So it's really important each year when you meet with seminary students to go over their seminary requirements, both from the discipline and from the conference, to ensure that they're on track. What we don't want to have happen is for them to get to their last year of work in seminary and find, oops, got this course we haven't taken yet, and well, I'm graduating, and so, because we're not going to waive those classes. They're going to have to be taken, and it's a lot easier for them to be taken when they're in seminary than it is to make them up afterwards. So it's really important to meet with the seminarians and to go over their academic work with them and make sure that they're on track to complete their requirements. So review the academic process. The transcripts should be sent to Dan Taylor and into that office, especially after they've completed their second year. Be sure that they know to send their transcripts to Dan to be reviewed. You know, if you meet with them in January, And you can ask them then to send the transcripts that up to that point so that he can review them and make sure that everything is covered. That would be helpful. Okay, maintain service record and file, forward that to the registrar. Approve service and leadership for certified candidates. You meet with certified candidates regularly between the time of their certification and their licensing. If they're not licensed right after they're certified, you've still got to meet with them to ensure that they want to continue to be not appointed, licensed, available for appointment is my term there. Annual review and renewal of candidacy and licensing for local pastors. That should happen with every local pastor. Every candidate you meet with annually and determine whether their whether they should continue to be licensed. Process of supervision of personal and professional growth. Professional certification. This is an area we haven't done a whole lot with. There are many areas of certification now for persons both lay and clergy to serve, and that's something that district committees work with, those people who want to be certified in various areas. There are things like campus ministry, urban ministry, evangelism, children's ministry, Christian education, ministry with people with disabilities, ministry with the poor, older adult ministry, spiritual formation, music ministry, youth ministry, camp and retreat. These are all areas for professional certification. And if there are people who either both lay and clergy who want to be certified, they come to the district committee for recommendation and then come on to the board. Examine all who apply to serve as certified lay ministers. This is a fairly new category. Let's see, have your committees, I know Oak Ridge has dealt with certified lay ministers. Has Knoxville and Maryville done that yet? Okay, that's a fairly new category that is being used more and more. In Chattanooga, David Hall has been working in training certified lay ministers and has said he would be happy to come to other districts and train others to work with. There's a prescribed course that is offered for certified lay ministers, and David has said if he could be helpful with other districts in the conference at helping you to work through that process, he would be happy to do that. So you might just make note of that, and we'll say a little bit more about that later. So that's just a summary sheet. The next handout, there is you can find this online on the General Board of Higher Education and Ministry web page. That address is down below, and this is simply the chapter on the work of the district committees on ministry that could be helpful to you in just knowing what your work is. Some of that is a repeat of what I've just shown you with the summary there, but you can look through to see how the district committees are to be organized, what their various functions are, and then it speaks about the decisions that you are required to make. If you look at that page, that's the the fourth page, about halfway down, where it says decisions made by DCOM. Everybody with me? Candidacy certification is a decision that you make. Notice that, or remember that when you certify candidates, that is the highest margin of votes required at any step in the process. For a certified candidate to be approved, they have to be certified by a 2/3 majority, and it has to be a written ballot. So that's the most strenuous vote that is taken anywhere along. And that's in response to their responses on the written questions from the discipline. I'm not sure that every district committee is doing that with candidates. And I'm not going to ask you whether you are or not, because, but there are a series of disciplinary questions that are required for certification of candidates. And those should be written and shared with the committee prior to their meeting, so you have time to look at them before you meet with them, and then discuss those questions, and you hear from the mentors, and you take the vote, and it's a written ballot, and it has to be approved by 2/3 majority in order for the person to be certified. Yeah.
So, I'm relatively new at this. I'm Mike Stombarski from Knoxville District.
Yes.
And my question is there some criteria of which we discern that? As in, if a person fulfills their academic requirements, they fill all the questions right, they jump through all the hoops, are they in? Because we seem to put a lot of on the psychological evaluation. But other than that, there's nothing that seems to, I'll use the term, wash a person out.
Right. The task at certification is to determine a person's fitness. And as I mentioned early on, that's a broad fitness for ministry in the Holston Conference of the United Methodist Church. And so that's the task to be determined, is to whether this person, whether it's a good fit for this person's understanding of ministry. The psychological is a part of that. Of course, the criminal background check is a part of that. You know, your own discussion with it. That's where it's not automatic. You know, they may answer the questions beautifully, but there may be something that is just not right in terms of their feeling like they're going to be able to be used well in the churches of our conference. So it's not automatic, no. As far as what does it, you know, what are you looking for? Well, you know, you're just kind of trying to determine, does this person have the gifts for ministry? Do they show evidence of providing fruits in their ministry? Do they have an understanding of how God's grace equips them for ministry? Are there others that would like to respond to that question?
What would my mama think?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good question to ask. Do I see, if this person is seeking certification prior to being licensed as a local pastor or prior to being ordained as a deacon or an elder, is this somebody that I would feel good about being my mother's pastor or spiritual leader, or mine, you know? And it's not just a matter of saying, oh, he's a really nice person and he's grown up in this church and we've known him for, you know, may not be somebody that, this may not be the best place for that person. And it's really important for district committees to make that call before they, you know, invest a lot of money and time and effort and everything else to move forward.
One more different way, maybe, because I'm really struggling with this. Is our bias to be inclusive, that is, because we want to give people a chance, or exclusive, because we want to give people a job?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are an inclusive church, and ministry is open to all persons, with some exceptions as the discipline lines out. So we are inclusive. However, there are particular standards that we hold one another to. And we have to ensure that those standards are upheld, and that we owe it to the churches of the conference who will be served by the persons we are certifying, that we have trust and confidence in these persons. So I don't want to say we're being exclusive, but I want to say we're being very careful. discerning. Yeah, yes.
At the point at which they just come to meet with us,
Right.
or to enter into the discerning process,
Right.
we're more open, right?
Yes.
It's the point at which we certify them.
Exactly.
to get more
Exactly.
picky.
Right, right. Yeah, that we're a little more careful to be sure. That's why that 2/3 vote is critical. I mean, because that's what's saying, you know, this is not just a simple process here. This is something to be taken very seriously. It's not just to raise your hand, all in favor say aye, any opposed no, go ahead. It's a prayerfully taken vote, and whenever a person is certified, because that's the first major step. They can't go anywhere in licensed or ordained ministry without the certification. Okay, yeah, Dave.
I just had a question. It's going on for the continuing certified candidacy. It says
Yes.
3/4 majority vote.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I said 2/3. It's 3/4.
Okay.
Yeah.
3/4 at the certification.
Yeah.
And continuation.
Yeah, yeah, which is even, I mean, that, yeah. Thank you for catching that. I was looking for where that was on the certification, but that's the continuation. Notice that everybody see where that is, the last bullet point under continuation.
And that both of those, certification and continuation, both have to be in writing.
Yes, yes. Yeah, yeah, that continuation, now that, I want to say a word about that as far as provisional membership, and that's what that's referring to. So you meet with them for certification. You meet with them each annually until they're ready for the next step, which that involves provisional membership. And so that last bullet, evaluate candidates for approval of provisional membership after they've met all the requirements and make a recommendation in writing to the Board of Ordained Ministry after candidate receives approval based on 3/4 majority vote. That's really critical too. You receive all of the psychological assessment. You receive the criminal background check. That's all done at the candidacy level. It's assumed that all is good by the time they get to the provisional membership level. If there's any concern whatsoever that you have in recommending a person for provisional membership, you know, you may feel okay about recommending them. You think that, you know, you think it's really okay, but there's this thing that's sort of maybe taken place that needs to be talked about, or there's this little concern. Please, please, please pass that along so that when the board interviews, they can discuss that with the person. They can look into that further. If there's some further testing that's needed, we can do that. But we need to know what's taken place on the district level prior to that recommendation for provisional membership. There again, it may be that somebody should not be recommended for provisional membership. It may be that a person is better served to stay as a local pastor, or to move toward to stay in that arena. Again, it's not good for persons to be moved on to provisional membership when they really don't seem to be able to, they may not serve well as your mother's pastor. So the provisional vote is a very important one too, that should be taken very, very seriously and given time to make that. Sometimes I hear of district committees just kind of meeting over the phone to approve somebody for provisional membership, and I say, please, no, no, no. You know, please meet with that person personally. Please take the time with them. You know, the cabinet doesn't like it when we ended up recommending people and ordaining people from the board who really should not have been, and you're the district committees are kind of the first step for helping the board to take that very seriously, and we count on you for that. License for pastoral ministry. responsible for approval, continuation, oversight of local pastors, and you can see all that is required there. Just remember that every local pastor, before they complete their 5-year course of study, is to have their license renewed annually, and that again should not just be a perfunctory vote. It's something that should have some discussion with it. I'd suggest that maybe you might think about what are the questions that you want to ask local pastors each year. You may want to focus on different areas of ministry. Sometimes they tend to just sort of, well, how are things going in your church, and where are you in the course of study, and that might be the extent of it. But you might take some time to look at various areas of the pastor's work, of the pastor's theology, of the pastor's spiritual life, and just converse with them about that as you think about continuing them for licensing. Look under the bottom of that page under certified lay ministers. There's another handout a little further on that. But if you're not familiar with this category, that is a pretty good summary of what's involved there, what's required for the certified lay minister. So you can just be familiar with that. There are more and more people who are interested in this step, and we are finding that certified lay ministers are fulfilling a pretty important role, particularly in smaller churches where a licensed or ordained pastor may not be available. They can work with one who is and offer some very important ministry. And then there are resources there on that final page that and I skipped over the readmission to candidacy or conference membership. Whenever anybody withdraws from, surrenders their credentials or withdraws, and then decides at a later time that they want to come back into licensed or ordained ministry, they come back through the district committee, through the committee from which they left. And so that's another important conversation that you have with persons, to think about, okay, why did they leave? What were the circumstances that took place there? What's changed since then? And again, just so that that's not just an automatic thing, but that's an action that you take seriously. Yeah.
Certified lay ministry, is that going to end up at some point replacing the TBS pastors?
Well, I don't know that. I mean, it would be nice because they have some training, and oftentimes the TBS people do not have any training. But oftentimes the to be supplied are kind of temporary folk. Charles, you can maybe speak to that. Maybe not. To be supplied serve at the discretion of the superintendents. And they have not participated in the course of study. I mean, they haven't been licensed. That's the key, that they're not licensed. The certified lay minister, they're not the same kinds of responsibilities that they have. The certified lay minister doesn't. I don't think I see them replacing to be supplied. I think there'll still be some need for temporary folk.
Yes.
TBS.
But I think it gives a pool
Yeah,
from which to draw.
Yes.
right, and that's key. It gives a pool.
You've got somebody who's at least been through some kind of training, that you'd be able to pull those kind of things. So I think as we move more into that and more districts have certified like ministers, that
Yeah.
becomes another group that you can call them to say,
Right.
service for a while.
Yeah, and some of them may choose to become part-time local pastors or even full-time local pastors. Yeah, there was.
The language is similar. Can you discern the difference between certified lay ministers and certified lay servants?
The certified lay minister comes through the district committee on ordained ministry. The certified lay servant does not. They come through the board of the lay ministry. The training is somewhat similar. It's a little bit more involved for the certified lay minister. You had somebody, right, that was kind of working with this.
But I think that might be the question involving, do they replace the supply? Because the servant is maybe more applicable to replace the supply than the lay minister.
Yeah.
Which is involved training, extensive involved training.
Right. And the certified lay minister serves, again, it's the superintendents who place these people, who ask them to serve. Okay, let's move on to the next handout, and we're going to speed it up a little bit here. This sheet, everybody got that? David will go over this a little bit more in his presentation, but this is just so that you can again see that there are many different areas to serve. This is the ministry of all Christians, baptized, confirmed, called to serve, and you can see there's various categories that you're able to serve, both as lay and as clergy. And so that's just a reference sheet that tries to summarize the various areas and roles. If you look on the back of that sheet, this was meant as a tool primarily for superintendents, but I think it also helps to guide the work of district committees just in thinking about how work should be divided through the year. I want to particularly lift up that last paragraph because that tells you everybody who is under your care as a district committee. Local pastors, for those who have not completed the 5-year course of study, that's required. If they've completed the 5-year course of study, you may still want to meet with them. You don't have to meet with them, but that's kind of at your discretion. Supply pastors, clergy serving from other denominations. Sometimes people forget about that, but if there's clergy who are serving from other denominations, they need to meet with the district committee at least annually. All candidates, you're not finished with a candidate when you certify them. If they're not, they get licensed, but there may be some that are not licensed. You continue to meet with them. Those who are in the process, those seeking certification, and those who are certified but not licensed. Seminary students, I've already talked about that. Persons on leave of absence, to be in touch with them, to ensure that they want to stay on leave, to see what their plans are for coming off leave, and then certified lay ministers assigned by district superintendents, and persons who are approved but not appointed. There's generally a list of folk who are approved for licensing, but they may not be appointed at any given time, and you've got to meet with them or be in contact with them to ensure that they are still to be approved, though not appointed. Okay, seminary requirements sheet. This has changed somewhat in recent years, so I just want to be sure that you know of these changes and are advising the students who are under your care appropriately. The first section, those are the courses that are required by the discipline for everyone, candidates for deacon or elder. And so those are the graduate studies. You can see them all listed there. Under B, the Holston Conference has some additional requirements. This is not in place of those. Those are additional requirements for deacon. A course in supervision or administration, a course in education or teaching. They may have a degree, undergraduate degree or specialty in education that might be waived at that point, and one class in homiletics. And then the elder is required to take a pastoral care class, 2 preaching classes, an introductory and an advanced, covering construction and sermon construction and practice preaching, and then a class on pastoral leadership and administration. These classes have to be taken from a seminary who is listed by the University Senate, and you can again go to GBHEM and find out which seminaries are listed there. And notice that last asterisk. As of 2012, the United Methodist University Senate allows for up to 2/3 of a clergy candidate seminary training to be completed online or in an online on-campus hybrid format. The remaining 1/3 must be completed on campus. A hybrid course is considered to be an online course. So 1/3 of the seminary work has to be done on campus. This has gotten a number of people messed up and is one of the reasons why you be sure and send a transcript to Dan's office prior to the 3rd year of seminary. There's an additional requirement that our board has made, requiring that some classes have to, of those 1/3 that are taken on campus, they must include a class in worship or liturgy, an introductory class on pastoral care, and 1 preaching class. So just be aware of those. Those are some changes there that have taken place, and you want to be mindful of that. And while we're talking about changes, I might also say that as you're interviewing people and recommending them, particularly prior to provisional membership, that you might be aware that the board has just decided to extend the provisional period from 2 years to 3 years. This has been kind of a back and forth thing. It was 3 years and then it went back to 2 years, but we're finding that there's a lot of reasons, good reasons why the 3-year period is a more helpful time. So that will that will be presented at the clergy session. It will go into effect with persons who are commissioned this June. We'll have a 3-year provisional period rather than a 2-year. I'm gonna defer to defer to Dave Graybill, who is the chair of the Division of Elders and has worked with this. There are a lot of reasons, and you can sum them up really quickly and speak out because you don't have the mic.
We have discovered in the process of going through a meeting with our provisional candidates when they come to full connection that many of those that we will have had to defer really benefit and could have benefited from that 3rd year on the front end anyway. It's something that our candidates themselves have requested for several years. The provisional retreats have been so positively received that they have felt like they would have benefited from an additional year. So that is taking their input into account. It's also something that most of the other annual conferences are already doing. Georgia, Florida, North Alabama are already doing a 3-year. They call it things like residency and ministry. They have a very charted out process for that. And so, it's not something that stretches our process out any longer than some of our neighboring conferences. They're already doing that, and we're going to try to plunder some of the Egyptians when we design our own process. But those are just broadly some of them.
Yeah. One of the new requirements from the discipline, you want to say something about?
That's right. Another big reason is the 2012 has required a Making Disciples project, which is under the current scenario, they would really only have 14, 15 months between commissioning and when their elders or full connection deacon or elders papers are due. That's really not a lot of time either to do that reflective work on the practice of ministry for the writing of those papers. It's also not a lot of time for the construction and development and review of a really good Making Disciples project. So that additional year gives time for that project as well as for some further reflection on the practice of ministry that forms such a big part of their full connection paperwork.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, that answer. The final handout is related to the certified lay minister. I'm not going to go over this again, but you can see that and read more about it and have hopefully a better understanding of what that new category is all about.
I'm David Woody, and I'm the Vocational Discernment Coordinator for the Conference Board of Ordained Ministry. Sorry, Donna, I'm going to move around. My responsibility for the Conference Board of Ordained Ministry is the candidacy process. How many of you have been through candidacy? Some of you started the process to become licensed or ordained before we had candidacy, right, Denny Humphreys? Well, you were sitting there grinning at me. Candidacy is fairly new to our process, but it's old enough that most of us have been through candidacy. It's also something that has evolved over time. It used to be done as a one-on-one individual relationship, was nearly 100% the responsibility of the District Committee on Ministry, in cooperation with the General Board. Do you remember the old blue candidacy guidebook, the 3-ring binder and all that kind of stuff? And well, Christian as Minister came later, actually. So yeah, Christian as Minister, and then the guidebook changed from the big 3-ring binder to the green book that we still have and is in the process of being edited and changed. The process has changed over time. Well, fortunately, we discovered was that the one-on-one relationship, albeit a good relationship, was not the most effective relationship in the beginning of ministry. That one-on-one relationship could be very fruitful, but if it wasn't a good match, it could be very damaging and really end the process or lend to ineffectiveness down the road. So we have transitioned to group candidacy. Let me hand these out to you, and then we'll keep on going from there. Take one, pass it out. At the end, if there are extras, please bring them back to me, because I will continue to reuse these. What led us to group candidacy was the appeal for the group learning process. Many of us, if you've had the experience of either going through licensing school or a seminary, we don't do that necessarily on our own. Most of the time, there are study groups, especially local pastors. And I'll tell you, having worked now for a long time with district committees and doing the interviews with local pastors, I'm pretty jealous of a lot of our local pastors who have developed lifelong friendships and colleagues in ministry. That many who have attended seminary don't have that unless they went to a seminary where we have a large group from Holston. That's a valuable learning. And so the group candidacy process gives us the opportunity to develop that group mentality from the very beginning. We are not franchisees all in competition with each other. Do you want me to say that again? We are not franchisees all in competition with each other. We are ministers of the gospel of Jesus Christ through the United Methodist Church, and we do that in one of, if not the most connected denomination. Thanks be to God. So, we start together and hopefully work together throughout ministry. There was a need for that development of colleagues. We were licensing and ordaining a lot of people who saw themselves as Lone Rangers, and they were me against the world. Me and God are going to save everything. And not only is that bad grammar, it's just really bad theology too. And then thirdly, we did discover that we had mentors who had either been doing it for a long time and could have cared less and didn't see the value in the process, or mentors who were poorly trained and did not understand the process from the very beginning. They just weren't responsive to candidates. So to change to a group process has given us the opportunity to have fewer mentors, larger groups, and we're finding, after having done this now for 2 years, that the response has been very, very good. Some of you have served as mentors. The way that it works, very quickly, and then we're going to go into some other very specific things. Each district only needs one mentor until you have more than 5 candidates in a given class. Let me say that again. Each district only needs one mentor until you have more than 5 candidates in a given class. So the class that is now forming is Class 3A. It's our 3rd year doing it, first class of the year. I'll explain that in a minute. If your district has 3 candidates, how many mentors do you need? If your district has 5 candidates, how many mentors do you need? You only need 1. You can choose to have 2, and that'll be okay. 1 mentor have 3 candidates, 1 mentor have 2 candidates. If you have 6, you have to have 2 mentors. If you're show-offs like the Maryville district, Charles left the room. Oh, man. Well, Maryville has had more candidates than any other district, and we've had to make them one group with 2 mentors at least once and maybe twice during the process, which is really cool. The groups then form across district lines unless you have more than 5 candidates. If you have 5 candidates or more, you're going to stay within your district and have that those two mentors meet with your group. If you have fewer than 5, we're going to put you together with another district geographically and work together across district lines, which we have discovered has been very fruitful in those relationships building and working together. We do allow, and I know Ann has some experience with the Knoxville Morristown District partnership. The Knoxville District candidate was at Duke and had to do some phone conferencing and meeting together. How did that work for you all?
It worked.
Yeah.
It had some pros and cons.
It's not perfect.
But geography, technology made the geography work.
Yeah, and we hope that we can do that more, and we've encouraged folks as internet is available, because we know in some parts of the conference there's not high-speed internet yet. So as the technology allows, we do allow for some of the technology to bridge the gap in distance. So we'll get into more of that in a minute. In candidacy, the only thing that has changed is that group process. Everything else from the very beginning is currently still the same. So as you see, there are 3 phases. There's the individual phase, which has not changed at all. Then there's the Orientation to Ministry and Candidacy Summit. That's new. And then the group process. The only part of the group process that is different from what used to happen is all that work in the guidebook, the green book that we talked about a minute ago, instead of being done one-on-one, is done in the group setting. Okay? The individual preparation is getting all the forms filled out, getting registered on OCAS, the online candidacy application system, having your mentor assigned to you, doing all the stuff leading up to ultimately culminating in your psychological assessment packet being paid for and requested, being sent. Now, instead of to the mentor, they're going to hold them in Nashville and send all of them at one time to the conference office so that they will all be in one place at one time, and we'll do the assessments at the summit. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Okay, so starting out, everything is the same. That has been a little confusing for some of you, but nothing has changed from the very beginning in the individual phase. All the same stuff has to be done. Once we move into the group phase, we come to what is called the Orientation to Ministry and Candidacy Summit. The orientation is now mandated by discipline. Every candidate, prior to receiving a license or provisional membership, shall be involved in an orientation for ministry. And that's what we'll go through here in just a minute. We're doing that at the summit now so that all of our candidates who have been certified for the last 2 years have had their orientation to ministry. Okay? So we're fulfilling that requirement this way. The summits happen over from 1 p.m. on Friday to 1 p.m. on Saturday, and they happen twice a year. What we have decided to do is move to a cycle where we do 2 classes per year of candidates. And here's your schedule. This is 2014-15. I'll do this 15-16 schedule later in the year. So if you look down to Class 3A, that's where we currently are. That's the class that is currently forming. The deadline for the individual phase to be completed was December 1st. As in all things, there's a little bit of grace, but we're about beyond the level of grace. So if there are some things as of today that your 3 districts really need to get done, see me and we'll try to make sure they get done if you have a candidate who wants to begin the process in January. That deadline is December 1st every year. Okay? Then in January, usually the second weekend, we will have a summit. This year it's January 9 and 10. It's at the conference office, 1 p.m. on Friday until 1 p.m. on Saturday. On Friday afternoon, we come together and we do a few things. I'll show you and talk about that in a minute. Do the orientation to ministry, and then the groups form and have their first group session and do the first work in the guidebook that night. Saturday morning, we come back together and do the psychological assessments. They're administered and proctored by the mentors. That's the summit. Okay? And then the group process begins. The groups form at the summit and they decide when they're going to meet. There are 6 sessions required for certification. We allow that they can miss 2 sessions, knowing that this is not a perfect world, and knowing that they can make those sessions up individually as you deem necessary. But we don't give them that permission, because what's happened, and I support this, but I caution the mentors. The mentors and the groups have decided to do multiple sessions at one time. Instead of meeting 5 more additional times after the summit, they want to meet 2, maybe 3 more times, which is fine, and do multiple sessions when they come together. The issue with that is, if a candidate all of a sudden has a problem and they can't make it to one of those sessions, one of those group meetings, they're going to miss multiple sessions, which means automatically they don't qualify for certification.
So the summit counts as a session?
The first session is done on Friday night at the summit. So number 1 of 6, they will have completed by the time they leave the summit. And then the groups have to decide when they're going to do the last 5 sessions.
Makeup sessions, one-on-one with the mentor, is that okay?
It is allowable, yes. And it takes a commitment of the mentor to be willing to do that. I would encourage you to help the candidate know the candidate needs to make it up, not the mentor. Does that make sense? Okay. We really want them to meet with the group, because it is the group process that fosters additional learnings. You can learn one-on-one, that's no problem. We're not saying it's bad, but the group process really engenders more learning and encourages collegiality, which we desperately need more of. Okay? Okay, cool. You have in the winter group, you have from January through April to complete all 5 of those sessions. And then we're encouraging district committees to meet end of April through May, get folks certified prior to annual conference. There are lots of reasons for that. Then you see the next group begins forming immediately. After the summit, we start forming the next class. So July 1 is the deadline for the next class. Is this making sense? I said the summit, I meant certification. After certification, we start all over again. So July 1 is the next deadline. July 24, 25 this year will be the summit. August to November to finish the group sessions. Certification sometime December, early January, whenever your committees can get together. So timeline making sense? We're doing 2 a year. And the reason we're doing this, you can take as long as you want to get through the candidacy studies for certification. There's no requirement on time for certification, none whatsoever. So what are the benefits of getting certified? Soon, quickly. Yeah, I think that's the number one motivation. The answer down front was money. Yeah, you cannot receive ministerial education funds either for local pastor's licensing school, course of study, well, not licensing school, course of study, or seminary unless you are a certified candidate. You can go to seminary and you can take course of study, but you don't get money from the Ministerial Education Fund, MEF, unless you are a certified candidate. The other thing that we have discovered, and I think a lot of districts have felt this, is folks have come and said, I'm an inquiring candidate, I want to start the process, and they just kind of hang out and don't ever really do anything because they're not sure of what they want to do. Well, the whole purpose of candidacy is to help them discern and come to some internal, at least somewhat peace of what could be. And so candidacy has to be used as that tool. And if we don't help them along that path, then there are a lot of who aren't going to take it. And I want to be really careful. The candidate still has to take initiative to start the process, to get the individual phase done, to show up for the summit, to show up for the groups, to do their homework, to then say to their local church staff parish or pastor parish relations committee, I have to meet with you, to then say to the district superintendent, thank you for doing the charge conference, when are we going to meet with the district committee? To do those questions that are required. Initiative is key. But there are points at which if we don't help them know what is next, they won't do what's next. We were saying, it's all up to you. What do I do? Well, it's up to you. Okay? So the quicker we can, not the quicker, but the more effectively we can help them move along in the process, I think it will help. Laura?
What's been the experience with kind of bivocational folks and folks that maybe are really on the local pasture track that have a job that's getting a Friday off?
Sure.
Those end of calendar issues.
From the summit standpoint, what I've discovered, I had one young man who was in the military, and he called me and he said, how important is it that I'm at the summit? And I said, as of right now, what we're saying is you can't do candidacy unless you come to the summit. There are two things you have to do face-to-face. One is attend the summit, and the other is your psychological assessment interview with the ministerial assessment specialist. Those two things have to be face-to-face. All the others, the group sessions, can be done virtually. And he said, is it really that important? And I said, it's the only time you are required to meet face-to-face with your group and your mentor. And he said, yes, sir, I understand. And he went to his commanding officer and said, this is important. His commanding officer said, I support that. And he got the time off and got furlough and came a long way. And he said to the group, I am so glad I did this. And the other folks who are bivocational, most of them have said after the summit, man, this is great. I'm really glad I did this. So what I'm hearing back is that even if it is a little bit of a hardship, it's helped them begin good. That's terrible. Start well. And if we start effectively, I think we'll get more of what we're looking for. So, yeah.
What are the costs associated with this now?
I'll give you all that in just a second. Okay, I don't want to give you that piece because you're going to spend all your time leafing through that and see all the nuts and bolts, but it's really well lined out, nuts and bolts, I think, and I don't want to go there yet, so I'll get it to you.
It's not about money.
Okay, good.
I just was curious, when the DCOM then meets May-ish, do the mentors provide written feedback about the candidates in their group? That's question one. Question two is that meeting about their certification?
Okay, I'm with you. Heretofore, I have not said to the mentors, do you need to make a written report? Moving forward, mentors have to make a written report. And I need a copy of that just for my purposes so that I know that that is being done. And I think the district committees would really appreciate a written report from the mentor. And the things that I'm going to ask the mentors to include in their report are, how do you experience this person individually, one-on-one? How do you experience this person in the group process? Do they play well with others? And third, how do you experience their fitness for ministry? And Stella emphasized, candidacy is about fitness. The next step, which the board deals with in provisional membership, is, do you know what it is? Readiness for ministry. That's for provisional membership. And then the final step for full connection is effectiveness. So those are the three things we have to discern all along the way. Fitness, readiness, and effectiveness. Your main responsibility is fitness. Okay? Remind me what your other question was. Oh, at the meeting of the District Committee on Ministry, when they come for certification, yeah, the mentor ought to be present, at least initially, and support what he or she says in that written report.
So the way this is supposed to work is they finish that candidacy, they go for their meeting with the DCOM that May, written report is present, then the DCOM decides yay or nay.
Indeed, yeah. Staff pairs, PPRs in there first, but yeah, I'll give you step by step how it has to go with check boxes and everything here in a minute.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just, isn't there another reason for the process? Don't they have to be certified candidates for, is it 1 year or 2? 1 year before applying for provisional membership?
That is correct.
And that's hung us up before
Right.
too, so that's another
Yeah,
reason.
it's a great point, David. Thank you.
The time, because sometimes people have had to postpone a year.
Right. We have actually had folks who applied for provisional membership, and we had to say, your papers are great, we love you, we would love to commission you, but you haven't been a candidate for a year yet. And the rule is they shall be a candidate for a year.
And they have to be a member of a church.
Have to be a member of right, either a local church or a United Methodist agency for a year prior to applying for candidacy. So, okay, I want to quickly move through what we do at the summit, because I think it's crucial for us as district committees to get a sense of where I'm going with the candidates, and as we move forward with the committee that's working on this, moving forward with campus ministries and others in helping recruit, and I'm going to use that word, recruit candidates for ministry. But also to get back to the question of when a district committee sits down with a candidate, is it our responsibility, or how do we know what the criteria? Blah, blah, blah. My prayer is, and I think the process is set up in such a way that folks will disqualify themselves throughout the process if set-apart ministry is not what they are called to. Does that make sense? That if we do well in candidacy, the discernment process will automatically help them answer that question. So that by the time they come for that last meeting of certification, there should be no question of their fruitfulness for ministry. Okay? Here's why. How many of you are elders? Go figure. How many of you are lay people? Good. How many of you are associate members? Zilch. How many of you are deacons? How many of you are associate members? And how many of you are local pastors? Okay. All of those people qualify for the District Committee on Ministry. And I think it's important for us to have all of those voices in the room, if at all possible. Why would I say that?
Have all categories of folks.
When a candidate comes to meet with the committee for the very first time, he or she's going to say, I am called to ministry. What do you think what do you think you're called to do in ministry? Well, I'm going to be what my pastor is. Because that's the only model they have currently, usually, for ministry. Is that what our process is about? Not at all. When we began the Candidacy Summit, those of you who've been at the summit, you can help me with this. We don't introduce ourselves as saying, hi, I'm David Whitty, I'm the Vocational Discernment Coordinator, I'm an elder in the annual conference. I start out by saying, hi, my name's David. And I give them a piece of paper and their questions on it. And the first question is, my name is. Second question is, I was called to ministry the day I was born. So for me, July 5th, 1966. Okay, figure it out. I'm 48. The next question, or the next statement is, that calling was made public the day I was baptized, blank. That was cool. If you didn't hear the beep, it was perfectly timed. The day I was baptized. Now, think about it for a second. Can you say the day you were baptized? I can't, the exact day. I can tell you approximately. I think it was October of 1966. I know that Dr. Mervyn Seymour, does anybody remember Mervyn Seymour? He was the Chattanooga District Superintendent, and it was at Lookout Mountain United Methodist Church. Are they even still open? Are they still open? Okay, good. I didn't know if they were or not. There was a question for a time, I think. My dad had just moved there as pastor. Mervyn Seymour was the district superintendent. He baptized me. I think it was in October. I was an infant. I don't remember the day. I know where the certificate is. I could go look at the exact date, but I'm unclear of that. The last statement is, let me back up. However, some people can say, it was this day, this time, in this place, and I remember it well. Praise God. Okay? The last statement is, I made that public. I made my calling to ministry public the day I publicly professed my faith, blank. You get the difference? Now for me, I can't tell you the day again, but it was in July of 1976. Yeah, July 76 at First Methodist in Galax. I had been at Cape Dickinson for a week, had a pretty significant experience. I came home and told my dad, and Dad said, sounds like you need to tell the church and take the next step. And I did, and then entered confirmation. But for a lot of folks, it's after confirmation when they profess their faith. But for some folks, it's the same day they're baptized. Why would we start the summit that way? We're all in the same place.
It's a process.
It is a process. Say that louder, Sherry. The number one and most essential credential we have for ministry is our baptism. And as baptized ministers of the gospel, we are all in this together. Which means any form of ministry is important. So from the very beginning at the summit, what our intention is, and saying to the candidates is, you don't have to end up looking like the person who nurtured your call. Because your call is not theirs. Your call is from God and God alone. Therefore, we're going to help you listen and look and discover other areas that you might be called into in ministry. That's why we do an orientation to ministry. The orientation to ministry has several goals, very similar to the group process. To build collegiality, to help candidates understand and appreciate each other's roles, to learn more about ministry to which one is called, to build relationships, to be able to clearly verbalize the roles of set-apart ministry in the United Methodist Church. Now, if I say that to you, how many of you can clearly verbalize the roles of set-apart ministry in the United Methodist Church without going through this orientation now? Oh, Dan, quit cheating in the back. Yeah. Some of you can, and I pray that you can. District superintendents, if you can't, shame on you. In district committees, if you can't, shame on us. Because this is crucial. When a candidate comes to us, our tendency is to say, we are thrilled you're called to ministry and you're going to be just like me because I identify in you the things that are important to me. Wrong answer. Last goal is to be able to verbalize how one's call fits into one of the roles of ministry. So what are the three specific areas of set-apart ministry? Understand that lay ministry is vital and vibrant and very important in the United Methodist Church. But candidacy is not about lay ministry. Candidacy is about set-apart ministry. So what are the three roles in set-apart ministry? There are actually 4 roles, but 2 in 1. Elder, deacon, local pastor, associate member. Okay? Set-apart ministry takes those 3. The first being local pastor, associate member, elder, and deacon. Now, my bullets are giving you the answer first. All 3 of those levels, areas, offices are certified or credentialed for the first thing being the ministry of Word. What is the ministry of Word? Preaching and teaching. That's the ministry of Word. Okay? What's the next thing that all 3 are credentialed to do? Yes. Service. What is the ministry of service?
Love your people.
Ministry of service. Leading people to faith in Jesus Christ. Leading the people of God in worship, prayer, and ministry to the neighbor. Providing pastoral care. Is anything else? Yes. Exercising pastoral supervision. What does exercising pastoral supervision mean? This one's really not hard. Yeah, it's supervising the work of the church, basically. We'll talk about it a little bit more when we get to the office of elder. But all 3 levels, local pastor, associate member, deacon, and elder, are responsible for leading the work of the local congregation. Okay? Deacons don't have the next step. Only local pastors and elders do. What is it? Sacrament. Local pastors, associate members, and elders are credentialed to the ministry of sacrament. What is the ministry of sacrament? Yeah. Offering people the grace of God through the sacraments, which are baptism and Holy Communion. Okay? And again, local pastors and associate members, where are they to perform the sacraments? Yeah, in the local church, but only in the charge to which they are appointed. Okay? Okay, deacons, what's the next thing deacons are credentialed to do? So it's word, service, compassion. Y'all are giving people all kinds of responsibilities that are not their responsibility. Compassion. What is compassion? Exemplify Christian discipleship. To nurture others in their relationship to God. To lead church people to respond to the needs of the most needy, neglected, and marginalized of the world. Do you get that? Are you beginning to sense the difference that deacons are down a different path? And it's the beginning of taking the word into the world. Okay? All right. Elders, there's something specific to elders, and what is it? Order. Only elders are credentialed for order. What is the order of the church?
All those reports.
Yeah, it's not just charge conference. Okay? Say the word again. The polity discipline of the United Methodist Church. Okay? To organize, administer the ministry of the church for service in mission and ministry. To organize the local church. Now, this is more than just local church administration. This is to help the local church be the local church in the world. There's a difference. That's why the old title was pastor in charge. We don't use that as much. It's still in the discipline, I think, but that's more the direction of order. And all other levels of the United Methodist Church. Therefore, only elders can serve in the office of bishop and district superintendent. Okay? All right. What's next for deacons? Justice. Outside the walls of the church. Share the good news in the world. Share the good news of the word in the world. Advocate for the poor, neglected, oppressed, discouraged. Provide ministries of mercy and invite Christians into these ministries. Okay? Do you have questions about this? I mean, you sort of knew this, but until you see it laid out, until you remind yourself of what it is, it's hard to remember it.
You better be, as an elder, you better be doing those last two as a deacon. I mean...
Yeah, I think that's important for... I think that's important for us to understand, that elders become the generalist of the church, and that we do sort of, in many ways, have to do all of these things. The local pastor does in the local church as well. But we're talking about candidacy, of helping people discern their call to ministry. At the summit, when we say to people, okay, how many of you think you're called to be an elder? And you know, almost everybody in the class will raise their hand, either for the office of elder or local pastor. And it's not until we go through this and people go, wait a minute, explain to me again the difference between a deacon and an elder. Here's the difference between a deacon and an elder. Oh, well, I really want to be an elder, but I don't want to move. Is that a good reason to be a deacon? Oh, heck no. No. Deacon is not the fallback for non-itineracy. There are other ways to deal with that. They're not great, they're not perfect, but no, the office of deacon is vital and vibrant in the United Methodist Church. And I believe there are more people called to the office of deacon, but we don't give it to them as an opportunity, as a choice from the very beginning of the process. It's not until they get into the process and have spent too much money to change. It is possible, but it's vital that we give folks these opportunities at the very beginning of the process. Hey, what other questions, comments do you have? Because I'm cognizant of time. I can preach all day. Yeah, we need to move along. Is this helpful? It's important, I believe. It's very, very important for you to have this kind of information when you meet with a candidate for the first time, before recommending them for candidacy, and you say to them, I know you think you're called to ministry to look exactly like the person who has nurtured you to this point, but in the United Methodist Church, we need people to serve in more than these areas and responsibilities. Okay? Any questions about associate membership?
It might be helpful to explain that a little bit more.
Okay. Associate membership is a full-time local pastor who has completed the 5-year basic course of study and is 40 years old or older.
Do they have to have completed a bachelor's?
Yes.
No,
The equivalent of
60 hours.
60 hours.
You don't have to have 60 hours of undergraduate credit.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
That's close, but it's not the equivalent. That's correct. So 60 hours of a bachelor's, 40 years old, full-time local pastor, completed the basic course of study, the 5-year course of study. An associate member can apply for provisional membership once completing the advanced course of study, which is the equivalent of 32 hours of seminary education.
So it's 5 years plus the 32.
To apply for provisional membership. And again, this is all after you're 40 years old. So you can begin to see where that could come into play and could be beneficial to some folks. Okay? So if you have a candidate who comes to you and says, I want to begin the process, and they're 35, and they want to be an elder, do you discourage them from being an elder? No. But you say, okay, you're going to have 3 years of seminary minimum. If you don't already have a bachelor's degree, you need to get up to the 60 hours. And then you need to look at seminary. And by that time, how old are you going to be? You see where I'm going? So you give them the options. You don't tell them, but you give them the options. So that when they hit the summit, they're going to say, okay, I had this in my head, and okay. Does it make sense? All right, any other questions?
And associate members still can go to full elder through the...
Yes,
Okay.
they can. Once they apply for provisional membership, either as an elder or a deacon, usually as an elder, because they've been a full-time local pastor. Doesn't mean they have to be an elder. They can do either. And they are elected into provisional membership, then they go through the same process provisionals and full connection go through. Yeah. Associate members basically have a permanent local pastor's license. They are guaranteed an appointment, but they still are limited sacramentally to the charge in which they are appointed. Okay? All right. Nuts and bolts. This is the packet for new candidates. And it starts out with a letter from Dan and Stella and me, and then moves into the step-by-step process for candidacy, beginning with the individual phase and moving on. If you need more of those, let me know. Every step of the process should be well-defined with a date. All the dates for the current class are in there. They're in red, and then every element has a checkbox by it. If you get to the last page of the requirements before, I can't tell you what page it's on. It's the page before all the financial stuff. The financial stuff's in the right-hand page. So the last 2 bullets, three or four bullets, give you the paragraphs from the Book of Discipline. You need some more? The last couple of bullets give you the paragraphs from the Book of Discipline that the candidate needs to be prepared to talk about with their PPR and with the district committee. The bullets for the PPR interview, was that 309 or is that 310? 309 something D. And then the district committee is 310-2A. And those are spelled out there. They should be in writing. And if district committees have not been doing that, I strongly encourage you to not shortcut the process there. Okay? Paragraph 310-2A. It's one of the bullets. They're toward the end of the requirements. are the questions in the discipline that they are to answer in writing for their certification interview with the District Committee on Ministry. Okay? These packets are the mentor packets. In this packet is the exact same checklist so that the mentors know every step of the process as well. But the last couple of pages are the curriculum for the group sessions. The curriculum is taken 100% from the guidebook, the Candidacy Guidebook. That's the 2009 edition. It is currently being revised, and when it's available, you'll know. The only place you can get the guidebook currently is on the online candidacy application system. You can either download it electronically or you can request a copy. As a mentor, I don't think you have to pay for it. Your candidates do. It's a $75 fee, either to download it or to get the paper copy. You can get on there and request one as a mentor, and they'll mail you one. District superintendents, I would encourage you to get a couple if you don't have them, but don't go crazy because they're being edited. Dan has shared with us that is in process, so hopefully we'll have a new one soon. But everything in the group process is listed in the back of the mentor packet, even down to questions you're encouraged to ask, but this is a minimum that we're asking the mentors to do with the candidates. If the mentors choose to do a little bit more with each session, go for it. But we're not here to teach seminary. We're here to give them the basics and discernment, okay?
But with the cost, all of that, the background check needs to be done before the summit?
Yes.
So all that basically is at one time?
That's all that individual one-time process before the summit starts.
I mean, like $460 is due before the summit.
What I have said to candidates, and any candidate so far, and Dan, you may know better than I because Marcy deals with this in the conference office. So far, none of the candidates have said to me, I can't afford this.
Any of them been college students?
Yeah.
I couldn't.
I get it. I totally get it. I would say to you as district committees, if a candidate comes to you and you think that they have some promise and you want to recommend them for candidacy, make them aware of the fees, and if they hesitate at the fees, you encourage their local church and you as a district to help find places to fund their candidacy. However, there's some purpose in the fees. The fees used to be quite low, and we subsidized a great deal. And when I talked with some of the other vocational discernment coordinators, specifically in Florida and North Georgia, their comment was, you get what you pay for. And Florida does not subsidize their candidates at all anymore. Their psychologicals are like $700. Maybe not that much. Their psychologicals total may be the $450. Our total for everything is $450-ish, $460. But their psychologicals alone are $450, and the candidate pays 100% of that. And when I questioned them, they said, that's the first place people wash themselves out. If they're not willing to go there, they're not willing to be part of our process. And what the response was, and we're not hurting for candidates. The other thing they found was, as they subsidized, there was a real high dropout rate. When they stopped subsidizing, the candidates stayed in the process. So if you're willing to pay the money, you're going to continue the process and be serious about it.
Well, I mean, I paid all the money.
I'm with you.
But I paid it in, like, the background check.
That's the other point, yeah.
I mean, this is all at one time.
You can make payments. And I don't think we're going to say to anybody, if you don't have it all right now, you can't do this. There are some things that are drop dead, like you got to pay the $75 to get on OCAS. In order to get the psychologicals from the general board, you have to pay their part of the fee, that kind of stuff. The parts that come to the annual conference, I think I say in there, we'll work out a payment plan. I think that's in there. So, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Charles?
Right, so we've got this class, that the deadline was last week.
Yeah.
Well, no, what I want to know is, when do we get this for the next class?
I will begin editing.
Somebody in January is going to come after this.
I will begin editing that as soon as we get through with the summit. Because I don't want to...
Late January?
Yeah. And I'll make sure it's available online. I'm not going to print a whole lot of more copies. Yeah. I'll make sure that the only thing that will change will be the dates. So it's a pretty easy edit for me. I just have to make sure I get the dates right. And somebody made me aware that I had not changed my own email address in the thing online, so I had to do that too. So the email address online is wrong. You have the correct one in that packet. Somebody else had a question. Yeah.
David, this is a small thing. It goes right back to the very beginning of a person's beginning to express interest in candidacy in the ministry. Back on that first handout, you gave us the process. Under number 1.1, the candidate discerns the call to ministry. 1.1.1 reads that, would it be wise either for a pastor or for a district committee to ask the person interested to write a letter to his or her pastor, to actually have it in writing, so that the pastor can be in a file and they can get some copies of the district superintendent?
Yeah, as you see, the process is supposed to start with the local pastor. It is the local pastor who is supposed to sit down with the candidate initially and go through the Christian as minister. We in Holston traditionally have not emphasized that step very much, some districts more than others. I would say that becomes your responsibility as district committees to teach the pastors in your districts. That's the first step of the process. That if someone comes to you as a pastor and says, I'm called to ministry, and they're in your youth group, college group, or they're in a Bible study for adults, get them a copy of the book, sit down with them and read it, and then you need to help them, pastor, need to help them make the first contact with the district superintendent. So it becomes the same thing. And from my standpoint, if that's a letter, great. If it's an email, that works. If it's a phone call, document the phone call so that everybody has some record of when the process began. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm speaking for Stella, but I think as time goes by, if we need to have these kinds of discussions with district ministers' meetings, I think we're willing to do that. It doesn't have to be this long. It can be a very brief, but yeah, because it's important.
And every pastor should have a copy of it.
Every pastor ought to have a copy of the Christian as Minister. That you can get from Cokesbury. It hadn't been updated in a long time. The pictures are still very dated, but it's still the same information and it's good stuff, and it does make a difference in the process for people. One more thing, very quickly. Once you are certified as a candidate, how long do you have before you have to do something? In other words, be licensed or elected into provisional membership. 12 years. So you can hang out as a certified candidate and do absolutely nothing for 12 years. Okay? So the clock starts ticking, but not until you're certified. Okay?
Good morning. Let me say a couple of things about local pastors. One of the things that David said, and I'll add too, is that local pastors can also become provisional members. It's the same requirements as an associate member. They just don't have to become associate members. Okay? So same process.
They don't have to be 40.
No. They take it when you look at in the discipline. If you look at associate member says associate members can become provisional members, and they give you the paragraph, and it takes you into the provisional member section, and it starts out with local pastors can become provisional members if, and it is still 40 years of age. So either way, if they've gone through the course of study, you still have to be 40. Okay? So that's just they do it either way. It was that 96 change where they created deacons. When they came back in 2000 and created local pastors, or associate members again, they sort of blended the two in some ways. Local pastors, district committees, you are responsible for keeping them, continuing them. And so once somebody has been recommended for license, and I should stop and say we've not done that much here, but that's one of the requirements of the district committee is once somebody has been a certified candidate, and if they go to licensing school, or they've completed 1/3, say they go to seminary and they've completed 1/3 of their seminary education. And superintendents, if you want to then have them licensed, that requires action by the district committee. Okay, so but they have to have met the requirement for license before you can recommend them. Okay? So once they're licensed, your responsibility is to continue to recommend them. If they are approved but not appointed, to continue them in that particular place until, as I think Stella said earlier, they either decide they don't want to be approved but not appointed, or they want to have license. The other thing that's very important for you all is to make sure that as people are doing the course of study, they stay on top of that. Now, for local pastors, part-time local pastors, the minimum requirement is 2 classes a year. For full-time, the minimum requirement is 4 classes a year. That's the minimum requirement. They can do more if they want to, but that's the minimum. Now, there are always extenuating circumstances. Something may happen. You know, family issues, people get sick, and that's the district committee's responsibility to make sure if somebody's got a problem, you know, then you want to remember that, because they may need an extension one day. They may get to that point where, you know, it says 5 years, the 5-year course of study, and for full-timers, that means 5 years, but they've got 8 years to do that, and if they're part-time, they've got 12 years to do that. And so, but there may be a time where somebody has had a significant event, and they need for you all to extend them further out. The final thing I'll say is when they get to a point, if you've got somebody who's not going to go to the course of study, and they just refuse, discontinue them. Discontinue them. You're not doing the church any favors, and you're not doing them any favors. And if it's just that they don't want to do it, you know, discontinue them. Are there any questions? With that, Stella?
But I think that is, none of us like to do that. None of us like to discontinue folk that are serving in ministry. However, our church is based on an educated folk and the importance of education. And so the course of study is required for a reason. And it really is the responsibility of district committees to ensure that local pastors are making progress every year in completing their course of study. So please, again, take this seriously and do the hard thing if it's required. Just like sometimes if you have to do the hard thing to say no to a candidate, sometimes you may have to do the hard thing to say no to somebody applying for provisional membership who has completed seminary and has spent all that money, but there may be reasons why you say they should not be recommended. You got to do the hard thing and give them reasons and share with them how they might use their gifts and grace otherwise for the good of the kingdom. Okay, the other items on the agenda, I think we've touched on most of them. David, did we pass out the certification handout? Do you want?
You have it.
Really? Okay, will you look in that bag there? I think, is the folder in there? I think maybe I gave it back to you. I think it was on here. Okay. We've got a handout that speaks about the professional certification, just so you're aware of what that's all about. I think that's just for your reference, and you can kind of keep up with that. Are there any questions? Yes.
With regard to this certification, this has been done through the conference renewal. Has been done through the conference.
Yes.
But it is now to to come to the district?
Well, it just starts there. I mean, yeah. I think for you to meet with the persons, and then they work with the conference board. Yeah, it's the
That's what I'm,
Oh, the renewal. Yeah, the renewal. The renewal is the conference.
Well,
But
because I'm hearing both.
Well, the reason we want to emphasize the certification stuff is because there need to be some options for some candidates moving forward. There are actually 3 levels of certification. There's professional, undergraduate, and paraprofessional. Professional certification is for somebody who has a credential in ministry already and they want to be certified in a specialized area of ministry. Undergraduate is an undergraduate student who attends a college or a seminary that has a program for certification. And when they graduate, they will be certified with a bachelor's degree. And the third is a paraprofessional. That's a person who's working in the church part-time, usually as a volunteer, can be certified in usually something like youth or children or something like that. But it could be older adults. We have seen folks who have applied for credentials in ministry, for instance, to be an elder, and really and truly their vocational calling was to be a hospice chaplain. In order to serve as a hospice chaplain, you don't have to be an elder. You just simply have to have a credential from the church. And a certification in older adult ministries qualifies. So it could be that you prevent that person, that you save them from the years and cost of a seminary education by offering to them from the very beginning certification courses in older adult ministry. So it's a good possibility. The conference board does not certify, the districts don't certify, GBHEM, the General Board of Higher Education and Ministry, certifies. Right. So that application goes to them, and the only time Dan gets that in his office as registrar is once GBHEM receives the application. And then the renewals actually go back to GBHEM.
Right.
Does that help?
Right.
Yeah.
But it's initiated by the conference board. That's how it's been done. I just want to clarify.
You're
because-
still interviewed by the conference board.
Yes.
Right.
Psychological.
That is correct.
Right.
That is correct.
Yeah, Rennie is just
Done through my office.
There you go.
right. Rennie has just completed the process in spiritual formation, so she's probably the one that is most familiar with that right now. But we do have a committee on the board that works with professional certification, but it's all done through GBHEM.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Are the classes mostly online, or are they? No, they're seminary classes.
The classes are seminary classes.
There are some undergraduate schools that offer certification classes as well.
And and there are some alternatives, like you can do a 2-year academy for formation, but generally it's 5 seminary classes.
Okay, they're generally seminary classes that are required in the particular area that you're seeking certification in. Okay, yes.
What do those certifications do, though? Like for someone, we've dealt with this several times in the Knoxville district, where someone has come and wanted to be a chaplain of some kind, and a piece of that is sacramental rites. What do those certifications do for someone in that particular calling, and do we have a route to put someone in that place on?
No, the only sacramental rites are with an elder. Professional certification, now there may be elders who are that are certified in a particular area. I mean, those are not limited to lay people, they're not limited to clergy people.
So if that's their calling, then we should send them down the elder track and encourage them to seek certification in addition to that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I think that's been an issue, the whole discussion that David shared about the set-apart ministry and understanding what each of those categories is supposed to do. He just kind of casually mentioned that some may say they want to be a deacon because they don't want to itinerate, or some may say, well, I want to be an elder because I want to serve the sacrament, but I really don't want to. I think you have to work that very carefully, but sacramental ministry is, you can't take the deacon route and assume that you're going to be able to serve the sacrament. That's up to the bishops. And the bishop may determine that this is a circumstance that would call for someone to be able to serve this, to have sacramental privilege, or they may not. So word and sacrament is for the elder. Yeah. Okay, are there other questions? Are there things that we haven't covered that you have questions about? I hope that I hope these resources will help you and will give you some better direction on how to do your work, and I just want to emphasize again our gratitude as a board for all of the work that you do on a district level. That it is so much appreciated, and we really do see it as a partnership, that we've got to work together. So if you have any questions at any point as you're working with candidates or as you're working through the process, please don't hesitate to call me or to call David or to call Dan. And if superintendents have any questions, don't hesitate to work with us, that we really do need to do this as a team. Okay, all of these materials will be online. The resources are presently online at holston.org/DCOM. All caps, DCOM, all caps. holston.org/DCOM. And this will be on there eventually, but all of the resources that we have passed out to you, as well as David's PowerPoint, is that? Not right now. Okay, but that will be eventually on there as well. So if you want to refer. And then also, remember the GBHEM website is very helpful. There's just loads of things on that website that you can go to for resources and answer of questions. So GBHEM/BOM for Board of Ordained Ministry, I think, and a lot of that stuff is there. Okay, any other questions that we need to care for? Okay, thank you.
Let's pray.